Families Forward. And I'm joined tonight with Kelly. Go ahead, Kelly. Want to introduce yourself?
Kelly Henderson, Executive Director of Forum Families Forward. We're really thrilled that you are making time for this really important topic and very thrilled to have our panelists here.
Yes, this is a question that we get a lot about help for transitioning to adulthood for our youth. So tonight we have gathered together a panel of experts. We have joining us this evening Paul Whitney from the ENDependence Center of Northern Virginia, Tracy Hill Harrington from the Virginia Department for Aging and Rehabilitative Services, and Kimberly Turner from Breakthru Services. And we've got some great questions we're going to ask them and information we're going to get. Before we get started with the panel, we did want to just welcome everyone and do a quick intro for some folks who may be new to Formed Families Forward. So we are a family-led nonprofit organization in Northern Virginia. We support foster, adoptive, and kinship families who are raising youth with special needs. We also work with the professionals who work with those families. So some of you are here in that capacity as well. The way we do this is through free trainings. We do free consultations to families. We've got some events, resources. We have a great resource directory on our website. We also run some support groups. We host webinars that are free to the public. We also have some online trainings that are free and some additional resources. I'm going to get into a little bit of those. But we also, also are a family partner to the Virginia Tiered Systems of Support, VTSS, which is a Virginia Department of Ed project. We will say that those of you in attendance this evening watching live are eligible for a certificate of attendance. If you want one of those, you'll be emailing me, and Kelly is going to drop that email into the chat. It's stacia.stribling@formfamiliesforward.org. And if you send that to me, I will send you a certificate sometime tomorrow. All right, so what do we have upcoming? We've gone through a whole series of webinars so far. So our next webinar will be in May 8th. And this is the who, what, when, where, and why, understanding foster care in Virginia. Kelly's going to drop that registration link there for you. We will be joined that evening by one of our staff members, Melissa Lebling, along with a retired DSS worker from Fauquier County who will answer all questions about fostering in Virginia. If for some of you that are here, you're already in that situation, but if you know folks that are interested, and even if you are in that situation, sometimes we still have questions about how that process works. So we invite you to join us for that as well. We do not have any webinars in April because this will be our big event, our Spring Forward Foster, Adoptive, and Kinship Family Fun Day. We will be holding this at the GMU Science and Tech campus in Manassas. This is specifically for foster, adoptive, and kinship families. So if you are one or you know one, please let them know about this. It will be from 8:30 to 2. It's an exciting day for the entire family. So the caregivers will be able to listen to a keynote address given by Jessica Stanarski, entitled Reignite Your Why. She is an author and a trauma expert, so she's going to be talking about all things that we understand and live as foster, adoptive, and kinship caregivers. And then there will be some breakout sessions where they get to choose some topics. While caregivers are doing that, they do not need to worry about their children because we are taking care of them as well. So we have some childcare that will be for the 0 to 4-year-olds. Then we have some outdoor activities with an amazing group called Camp Soraka. They're going to work with the 4 to 9-year-olds. They're going to do some arts activities, some outdoor activities, and then 10 and up will be able to take part in George Mason's outdoor experience called The Edge. So they'll be doing some collaborative work. They'll be doing a tower climb. There's a lot of amazing things going on there. So we still are in the early bird registration until the end of March. So if anyone is interested, now is the time to go ahead and get those tickets. We are also fundraising right now for some scholarships for youth. So families do need to register and pay for the youth up front, but it looks like we're in a really good position to offer scholarships for those families. So they will be reimbursed for the registration for the youth. So Jessica Sonarski, who will be our keynote speaker at Spring Forward, is also coming the day before on Friday, April 12th, to do a professional workshop. So for all of you folks out there who are listening, who are CASA workers, who are social workers, who are therapists, this is for you. It's called Trauma, the Brain, and Hope: Implications for Professional Practice. She is going to be talking about the brain, and she does a phenomenal job of talking about neuroscience and the brain in terms that I can understand. So she's got some great things going on. That is from 8:45 to 1 o'clock at our Fairfax office. Address is there. We did just get approval for CEUs. So if you are a social worker looking for CEU credits, it might be an additional, there will be an additional cost to that, but it's already approved as a program that will get you those credits. So Kelly is dropping that registration in the chat for you. We also have an online learning module called Learning Your Way. This is self-paced. We've got a bunch of courses about, we've got trauma, we have special education, dispute resolution, communication, other health impairments. There's some great stuff in there about FASD, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, as well as Tourette syndrome that we added this year. So Kelly will put that registration in the link.
Oh, you don't count.
And
You know what?
we also have some support groups that we run. There is a Stronger Together youth peer support group. This is for ages 14 to 22. We are wrapping this up. Next week is our last session for this group for the winter, but we will be having a new group in fall of 2024. So make sure that you're on our mailing list, check our website, and we will have information about registering for that new group in the fall. We also have formed Families Together, which is a peer-led support group for caregivers, adoptive, foster, and kinship caregivers. They meet twice a month. The first meeting is virtual and the second meeting is in person. When you register, you just register in general and you'll get reminders for both the virtual and the in-person. But if you are only able to attend virtual, because we're not able to offer childcare for this support group, that's fine. You can still register if you are only able to do one of those mediums. All right, and finally, just a reminder about the certificates to email me. We have our website here. We are also on Facebook and Instagram. And so we hope that you follow us on those platforms as well, because we always have some inspirational and exciting events to share for you. Okay, so tonight we are so excited to have these agencies featured here on our panel. Kelly is going to go ahead and drop these links into the chat. These are the links to their organizations. And at the conclusion, when we post this recording, we will also have these slides available so that you can always get back to these sites if you need to at a later time. But Kelly is going to go ahead and facilitate this panel. So without further ado, I will stop sharing and turn that over.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Stacia. And again, thanks to all the attendees for joining us tonight. We know that this is a topic that is of great need and interest and passion, particularly as we head towards the end of the school year for some families. Some folks are getting a little wondering, a little nervous about what comes next. So we are so thrilled to have Tracy, Paul, and Kimberly with us. I'm going to give them each a chance to introduce themselves, talk a little bit about their agencies or organizations, and I'm just going to facilitate that. While I'm doing that, and while Kimberly and Paul and Tracy are talking, please feel free to chat in to Stacia your questions. You can do it directly to Stacia if you don't want to be identified, or you can do it to the whole group, but we will definitely take time at the end of the sort of formal program to answer questions from the audience. So Kimberly, I'm going to turn to you first. If you would mind, again, fairly briefly, 3 minutes or less, would you talk a little bit about yourself, your programs, and the services you offer, including basic eligibility requirements for your services?
So I am representing Breakthru Services, also known as Breakthru Autism Services. The company first started providing services to children with autism. Now we have expanded and we have added mental health skill building, which is a skill building program for adults ages 18 and up. We assist with making sure that individuals with a mental health diagnosis are getting the support and getting the resources that they need. For example, psychiatry, outpatient therapy, any type of case management, housing, food, just day-to-day living. And with those services, the eligibility, we do take all insurance. So it would be based upon an assessment being done and the insurance company approving the services for the client.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kimberly. I'm sure we'll hear a
you.
little bit more about your mental health skill building in a little bit. Paul,
Yes.
can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, and I will try to keep it brief. Thanks again for having me. So if you're not familiar with Centers for Independent Living, I'm a manager of youth programs here at the Independence Center of Northern Virginia, but we're part of a larger network across the country. There's over 400 centers in the US. Our center, we serve Northern Virginia, so that includes Fairfax County, Arlington County, Loudoun County, the city of Fairfax, Alexandria, and also Falls Church. Before I get into our services, there are a few things that make Centers for Independent Living unique. Firstly, every center is mandated that 50% of our staff and 50% of our board is made up of people with disabilities. So we're not just serving folks with disabilities, we're also providing jobs to people with disabilities, and we're people with disabilities serving people with disabilities. The second thing that makes us unique is that we're cross-disability oriented. So what that means is that to receive services from us, no matter what it is you're looking for, you just have to identify as an individual with a disability. So that can be ADD, ADHD, PTSD, traumatic brain injury, dyslexia, asthma, cancer, HIV. The list really goes on, and we try to be as inclusive as possible. And then finally, the third thing that really makes us unique is that consumer control is part of our mission. So we have no cookie cutter formula to how we serve folks. When you come into our doors, whatever goal it is that you're trying to achieve, we're going to be there to help you achieve it. And we're not like case management, and where we're going to, apply for SSI for you and then let you know when it's been done. You're going to be part of the process every step of the way. The reason why that we find that so important is that, if you run into a similar issue down the road, you will be better equipped to maybe handle that on your own, empower yourself to be able to do that, so you're not reliant on an agency every time you have a hurdle. So our services, at Centers for Independent Living, we have 5 core services, and these are services we all provide. And these are, and I won't get into the weeds on the details of them, but information referral. So, a quick referral, if let's say it's a you wanted a food for others referral, we can make that referral for you. Maybe you needed a housing voucher, and we could provide information on the housing voucher and how to get referred to that program. Advocacy is another one of our core services. We do this on the individual level and also systems advocacy. Independent living skills training, I think that's a big part of what our center specifically works in. And there's different ways, this looks at ECNV. One way, and this is probably the most common way, you can work one-on-one with one of our staff people or staff to, maybe you want to learn how to cook lasagna. And so you can work with someone on our staff to help you achieve that. Maybe you want to learn how to navigate your community in a safe and reliable way. And again, going back to consumer control, whatever it is your independent living goal is, our staff will help you work to achieve that. And we also have programs related specifically to independent living training. And so these two programs that we're providing now are Money Matters. So that's a financial management course. It goes over 8 weeks, and it's in person here at our office in Crystal City. And then we also do Thriving Solo, which is an independent living skills training class where they do a lot of fun things. They do cooking classes. They go grocery shopping. They do a little bit of travel training. And again, that's another 8-week program. And really, those two programs really target youth in our community. The fourth core service that we provide, and this is kind of baked into everything that we do, and that's peer counseling. And so what peer counseling is as a person with a disability coming to get services from us, you can be provided with a peer counselor, and that peer counselor is another person with a disability who's been there, done that, and can kind of help you through any sort of struggles that you may have. And then finally, our last core service is called Transition Services. When Centers for Independent Living first popped up in the early 80s, transition really centered on getting folks out of nursing homes and out of institutions and back into the community, into their own homes. Today, we still do that to a degree. Thankfully, it's not as common as it was back then. But I would say our youth transition is more of a focus today, and that's why we're all here.
Okay.
Kind of under that same umbrella are the two programs that I help run. And that is actually programs. I'm glad Tracy's here because we work closely with DARS to provide these programs. They're pre-employment transition services programs, and they are instruction in self-advocacy. And so it's called our I Am Self-Advocacy program. And that is, and at its core, it's an 8-week program, but we kind of provide it in a variety of settings. We're now actually in schools providing this service as well in Alexandria. And then we're also going out to Loudoun and providing these services in different ways with, if you're familiar with Project Search or CAST programs, again, these are all through DARS. And so we go into those settings as well. I'll get kind of later on, I'll talk a little bit more about our I Am Self-Advocacy program. It really is my day-to-day and what I'm really, takes up a lot of my time. And then our second pre-employment transition service is called Ready to Achieve Mentoring Program. We call it RAMP because it is a mouthful. And this program it spans the course of a traditional school year. So it's roughly 9 months long. And students that participate in these programs, they go on worksite visits. They work with a mentor to develop a resume, to work on different career projects. And it's a newer program for us, but it's really coming along, and I think the students really enjoy it.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, no,
We'll definitely hear more about all of those programs as you answer further questions. Tracy, can you talk a little bit about DARS?
Sure, I'd be glad to. Thank you all for having me this evening. And Paul, I'm glad you didn't steal too much of the DARS thunder there. But hopefully by the time we get done today, you all will be able to see just how closely DARS works with our community partners like ECNV to deliver services to our community. But I'm Tracy Harrington. I am the District Director for the Northern District of DARS, the Virginia Department for Aging and Rehabilitative Services. I specifically work for the Division of Rehabilitative Services, which is the federally mandated state agency that provides vocational rehabilitative services here in Virginia. There's a program like mine, vocational rehabilitation, in every state and territory in the country. If those of you who maybe came from Maryland would know that agency has doors. So there's one of us in every state. We offer a wide range of services for really any working age adult who is interested in seeking employment and who has a disability. So we offer both pre-employment transition services that Paul referenced to students with disabilities who are engaged in some type of secondary, post-secondary, or approved training program. We also offer vocational rehabilitative services for folks who are young adults or are maybe more interested in pursuing direct employment services and obtaining a career. Pre-employment transition services are offered to students with disabilities ages 14 and above, and they are really meant to be an introduction to the world of work for students with disabilities. By and large, a lot of students these days, with or without disabilities, are leaving high school with really no work experience under their belt or no exposure to the world of work. Specifically for students with disabilities, this is very, very challenging in terms of those students just don't get the same exposure that maybe other students might. And so really the pre-employment transition services are meant to expose students with disabilities to the world of work, career exploration, work-based learning experiences, consideration of post-secondary training options, self-advocacy, and those things that are meant to carry a person on to their adult working life. In order to be eligible for pre-employment transition services, a student just has to identify themselves as a student with a disability. And the way that we look at that is a young person receiving services under an IEP, or they receiving access through a 504 plan. If one of those two things exist, and you have a young person who you might believe would benefit from pre-employment transition services, it's a very easy referral to us through your school, and just letting us know that you're interested in receiving that. We've got counselors that work with all of the high schools across Northern Virginia. Beyond pre-employment transition services, and for those young adults and working age adults who are interested in employment services, we offer a wide array of services to eligible persons who need vocational rehabilitation to go to work. Our services are very individualized. They're uniquely designed for whatever that person brings to the table and what their employment needs might be. But a person is eligible for receiving vocational rehabilitative services if they have a disability, if that disability poses a barrier to their successful employment, if they actually require services to achieve an employment outcome. And what that means is that we all have our own unique limitations or challenges, maybe disabilities, but is that preventing you from being successful and going to work? And do you require some type of assistance or intervention to achieve some type of employment outcome or goal. And then there's a presumption that every person can work, unless there is some demonstration that they're not able to work. So we're going to approach it from the perspective of how can we help you go to work? And then there is also some presumptive eligibility for persons who receive SSI or SSDI. So if you have a young person that you're working with or that is in your family and they receive SSI or some type of SSDI, then they're presumed to be eligible for our services. The employment services that we offer are, like I said, they're varied, and they're really dependent on a person's own unique set of circumstances. Most frequently, people receive guidance and counseling services, assessment and career exploration, job readiness training, job placement assistance, and then, depending on what their interests are, a person might receive specialized training services, whether that would be educational supports or vocational training or career type training. We offer training services, assistive technology assessments, assistive technology services. So we offer a wide range of services to help a person become employed. And vocational rehabilitation, that's really the focus of our goal, is to help people go to work. So while someone's in school, we're trying to introduce the notion of work and really develop a desire to go to work. And then once a person is entered into vocational rehabilitation, it's really about helping them to prepare for, find, and keep a job.
Thank you, Tracy. So I think that you all gave very comprehensive overviews of all the variety of things that you do. We're going to now focus a little bit more targeted on children, youth, and young adults, particularly youth and young adults with mental behavioral health needs. So in 2 minutes or less, would you each address this question about what challenges might a family and their youth or young adult who has mental or behavioral health needs face as they prepare for the transition through high school and into adulthood? And this time I'm going to start with Paul. 2 minutes.
All right, thank you. 2 minutes. Okay, let's do it. Okay, so I can probably start with 2 challenges. I'm sure the others will be able to add to this. One challenge, and this is something that's on ECNV's mind a lot lately, is this idea that our society wasn't built for everybody. It, in a lot of ways, was built on ableist designs, and so it forces those of us who don't fit the mold, those who need accommodations or specific services, to get creative when thinking about their future and what it looks like. And so in my mind, the key is that independence can look like a lot of different things. And I think for us as parents, we really have to open our minds and say, yes, my child may not achieve independence in the same way that I did. Maybe they have fall sensors in their home. Maybe they have a medical dispenser that automatically lets them know when it's time to take medicine. Maybe they have a system of alarms on their phone to remind them to go to work and to brush their teeth. Or whatever it is they need reminding. Maybe they have a roommate who lives with them rent-free to exchange, in exchange for providing informal support. And these are all different services that are available and do exist. And so the difficulty there is knowing, and this kind of goes into the next challenge that I want to talk about, knowing what services are available and how do you get those services, and do you even qualify for those services? And at the core of knowing what it is you need, that is self-advocacy, right? And so my advice in terms of, making sense of this tangled web of services in Northern Virginia, is that there really isn't a cheat code to understanding it all. It just takes work and coming to webinars like these, listening to people that, you know, do this 40 hours a week as their job, and to start as early as possible. If your child is still in public school, certainly take advantage of the built-in supports at the school. You know, some folks that I work really closely with, especially when we provide programs in schools, are transition coordinators. And these folks can really help you out a lot in terms of identifying programs and services that your child might be able to use after graduation. And if you're not already connected with DARS, I'm going to plug DARS again. Get connected with a counselor as early as possible. We've started working with 9th graders this year for the first time with our pre-employment transition services. And just really grateful that these 14-year-olds can get that started, their relationship with DARS. And then, you know, you can also receive case management services through your county's community service board. Obviously, a lot of experts there that can help you make sense of a lot of these different programs and services that are available. And then, you know, are all the nonprofits out there that don't get enough of a shout out, like Forum Family Forward, like ECNV. Another great one is the Arc of Northern Virginia that can help out a lot. So the key here is to not feel like you're on your own, because I feel like as parents, especially parents with children with disabilities, we feel like we're in our own little world and trying to make the world perfect for our child. But there's a lot of people out here that will help you and make sense of this kind of crazy world.
Thank you, Paul. That was really good. And I loved your term tangled web that we have in Northern Virginia, because that is indeed sometimes the impression one gets as they try to navigate. And Stacia's going to actually paste into the chat our resource directory that includes a lot of the folks you just mentioned. Paul, so if you in the audience are not familiar with like the Arc of Northern Virginia, we have contact information in there. So Kimberly, can you talk a little bit about challenges specific to children, youth, and young adults, particularly with behavioral and mental health needs?
I would say that challenges will be the feelings that they will feel coming into, you know, adulthood, transitioning out. It can be very overwhelming. It's a change. It's a difference. You sometimes may feel like you have more support when you're in the high school stage, and then you're stepping out into the adulthood, into the more independent. So I would say the challenges would definitely be, you know, their feelings. And like Paul was saying, there are resources out here. You just have to make sure that you're active with them, because there are going to be times, you know, when you're transitioning, you're kind of in the beginning of figuring things out. You know, you're trying to, you know, step into adulthood and find yourself. And the advice that I would give is just your pace. This is not a race. So you're going to do things at your pace and what works for you when it comes to your needs, when it comes to behavioral mental health needs. But definitely take advantage of those resources, because being overwhelmed and walking in it thinking that you have to do everything fast paced, that's going to be a challenge.
Well said. Thank you, Kimberly. Tracy, how about you?
So I really tried to think about this, you know, as we were coming into this meeting. Life is challenging, right? So we all are experiencing challenges, and you know, what might be challenging for one person, or what might be challenging for one person may not be challenging for another. And I think when I'm able to reflect on maybe some common themes of challenge in the work that I've done over the many years that I've been with DARS, I know that one challenge that comes up pretty regularly is just this different notion of um, expectations and deliverables between someone as they're in high school and receiving a lot of supports and guidance, you know, in their program, and they have a very specialized IEP that says certain things will definitely happen. And then as you move over to adulthood, it does sometimes feel like you're stepping into an abyss. Like, where do those supports come from, and where will I get the help? And oh, by the way, there are going to be different expectations of me as a person with a disability, or my young person, my child, young adult who is pursuing work. There will be some different expectations of them as they enter adulthood, and particularly when they consider employment. So I know that just being aware of those differences, and the fact that there are different expectations, and just trying to think forward about how maybe those can be addressed, so that it doesn't feel like you're stepping into the unknown. That's one thing that I'm aware of that comes up pretty frequently in our work. Another thing that I know is a pretty common challenge is, especially with young adults who have had mental health concerns or behavioral health needs, is really how to build that support network, and what does support look like once you're out of special education or that type of highly supportive environment. It may not look exactly the same as what it did when your young person was in school, but there's still the opportunity to build those support networks. And it's really just taking careful assessment of, goals, desires, outcomes that, a person is hoping to achieve, and really beginning to build that framework as you head down the path with your young person. I'm going to say head down the path with your young person, because at this point, maybe as a younger student, you were out in front, paving the way and making sure that your child was receiving the services that, they require. But as they're making that transition, this is really now you're walking that path alongside of them, because eventually they need to stride out in front. And sometimes that can be challenging too. So those are three things that I think someone might face in terms of challenges as they're making their transition from high school to adult life.
Okay, I'm going to turn back to Kimberly. Can you talk a little bit about the differences and similarities between Breakthru's adult mental health services and your therapeutic support services? And what is the role of family in both of those types of services, please, Kimberly?
Okay, so the similarities will be that in both services, there are professionals that are assisting with their transition. They both provide a safe and confidential environment when it comes to exploring thoughts, feelings, needs, any types of services that are needed, techniques, any type of behavior therapy. Not a lot of difference, but some of the difference, I would say that the counseling portion of it, it typically focuses on addressing specific mental health needs, while the support, it's more from the family standpoint with engagement. And then when it comes to the role of the individual's family in both of the services, it can vary depending on the situation. But in the mental health, family members, they may be involved in therapy practices, so they can continue with that. And then when it comes to support, gaining understanding, there are a lot of family members and people around who don't really understand. But when they are supportive and when they are involved to gain that understanding of what's really going on, it gives a better slate when it comes to helping. And so, and the support also, family members can be encouraged to even participate in the therapy. And this could help improve communication. This can help improve relationships. And it can create a more supportive environment for the individual who is seeking help. Involving family can definitely contribute to the individual's overall well-being. You see that people work better sometimes, a lot of times, when they are supported and they have, someone who can help them and shows that they care and want to gain understanding of what's going on with them.
Great. And I don't, this was not a question that Kimberly knew was coming at you, but just because you mentioned in your introduction that you do work with insurances, those services sometimes reimbursable? Is that something that specifically the adult mental health services and the therapeutic support services, those are reimbursable or billable
Yes.
through? Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Good to know. All right. Thanks so much for that, Kimberly. For some folks, that may be new service options for them. So I wanted to make sure that we had a little bit more information. Tracy, the next question is for you. Sometimes the families that we work with at Forum Families Forward have the idea that DARS services are just for persons with intellectual disabilities and developmental disabilities. Can you talk a little bit about the role of DARS for individuals who don't have necessarily a diagnosed ID or DD, try not to use acronyms, diagnosed intellectual disability or developmental disability, but do have mental health conditions, or those who have ID and DD and mental health conditions?
Sure. Well, as I mentioned earlier, DARS works with folks who have all different kinds of disabilities, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, cognitive. So we are not just centered on one type of disability or another. By and large, a majority of our clients have some type of mental health concern, and we have seen mental health concerns grow rapidly over the past few years, especially after the pandemic. We're seeing a lot of people that are presenting with some sort of mental health concern. So in working with DARS and thinking about employment, that can be, a stressful and taxing time, especially if a person is uncertain as to their future or where their resources might be coming from or what kind of support that they might have or might not have. And so what we do try to do in those situations is really involve other members of their team in the vocational planning. And so if somebody has a trusted mental health resource, whether that is a therapist or a counselor or a support coordinator or a peer advocate or someone who could help a person help support them or help represent maybe what their needs are or provide some support in the decision-making process, we very much like the opportunity to include that person with our clients' permission. And there are so many benefits to that. Just because, a rising tide lifts all ships. And, if we're all working together on the same goal, then we can reinforce and move together with some common goals where we're helping everyone deliver what they can with the focus being on the person who's interested in going to work. There are some different employment models out there with folks who have mental health issues. Individual placement and supports is a evidence-based practice where really the notion is that work is therapeutic, and getting a person to work and watching them succeed and making adjustments once they've gotten there can be very beneficial. So we do try to work closely with some of our other community providers in terms of providing those workplace supports. We work closely with the Community Services Board and the therapeutic services and supports that they might have available through their programs. We also have a wide network of employment service organizations where we can assist people with employment coaches on the job to help them learn how to not only do their work, but also build those natural supports on the job as well. And so there are quite a few things that we can do to address mental health concerns, as we approach employment.
Well said. Very, very collaboration, especially with those who are sort of in the business of mental and behavioral health, I think is a really nice way to move forward. So Paul, our last specific question is for you, and everyone remember that we are going to have time for questions and answers at the end. So feel free to chat those in or be ready with them. Paul, one key aspect of the mission of the ENDependence Center is indeed reflected in your organization's name. How do you help individuals in their teens and early adult years, their early 20s, who have mental health conditions or other interfering behaviors? How do you help them envision and work towards their independence?
Thanks. Yeah, so anytime we're working with somebody, especially youth, we want to remain goal-oriented. And like Kimberly said, it's not a race. We're doing it at our own pace. And so we want to break those goals down into small, achievable steps. So that, the goal can actually be achieved. And then also the other thing we're looking for, and I think is baked into everything we do and is helpful in its own right, is that we ask everybody that comes through our doors to be active participants in both building and problem solving their own futures. Just that activity alone is a learning opportunity, and it inspires independence, right? I think one thing that we found, and maybe a lot of us know this, is that young people with or without disabilities, but especially with disabilities, are often too comfortable with other people doing things for us, aka our parents. And a lot of times if they're in high school, our parents are doing a lot for us at this point. And so this is an opportunity for them to come to us and really start to take a little bit of responsibility in achieving some of the goals that they want to set out for themselves. In terms of our services, I've already mentioned our I Am Self-Advocacy program and our Ready to Achieve mentoring program. These are both DARS funded services, and you can, participate in these by getting a referral from DARS, from your DARS counselor. We have our IL skills courses. We also do travel training. We actually partner with DARS to do this as well. We also partner with WMATA to provide this service to the entire DMV metropolitan area. So we're actually branching out of Northern Virginia here a little bit with this service. I think this is helpful because, navigation, I think, especially if you're talking about living independently, navigating your community is really important, especially if you don't have your parents to drive you around anymore. Some of the other things we do, counseling on benefits and services. We have a lot of people on staff who are not only know a lot about these services, but use these services themselves. And so we counsel families and youth on these services that they may qualify for now or in the future. Independent living skills, anything from housing, grooming, vocational skills, resume building, skills like cooking, transportation to a certain place that you want to go to, really anything that you can think of. We have folks on staff who will help you achieve that independence goal. And then, we're also here, we're kind of a catch-all. Whatever it is that you ask us, if we don't know it, we're going to research it. So I've spoke to families about alternatives to guardianship. I think it's a topic that people don't talk about enough. And if you want to talk about independence, that starts with having guardianship over yourself. And so that's something, me personally and on a professional level, I'm really invested in. We help folks with DD waivers, how to get those, do I qualify? So it's really a lot that we do. So thanks.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you all for your quick answers. I know that you have lots more that you could say, but and we have been receiving some questions. So a last question that we had was about your recommendations to families, guidance to families, but I'm going to ask you to just keep that in your mind as you maybe respond to the questions, because we are in our last 10 minutes. So Stacey, would you share some of those questions? As you do that, one of our participants is here from the Connor Strong Foundation, Tom is here, and he wanted to share with you, and I'll put it in the chat, an event that's happening tomorrow. That's a collaboration between the Connor Strong Foundation and GMU, specifically on helping it's called Graduation Blues, helping your kids navigate and plan what's next. So that's a very timely topic. So I will include that as Stacia asks the questions.
Absolutely. Yeah, we do have a few. This first one I think is for Tracy. You mentioned that schools would be the ones that could recommend students to DARS, but how would homeschool students access those pre-ET services?
You would just simply need to call our office and say that you have a student who has a disability and you believe they could benefit from pre-employment transition services or vocational rehabilitative services. It really is quite simple to refer someone to our offices. It's actually minimal information, just name, address, and how can we get in touch with folks, and you can get connected to a counselor. For students that are homeschooled, the criteria still applies that in order to receive pre-employment transition services, so they would need to be a student with a disability or be receiving services under an IEP or a 504 plan. And we know that that doesn't actually, that may not exist in the homeschool world the way that it is. So we will, consider that medical documentation about a student's disability. So we have offices, just so you all know, I'm not sure if I mentioned this before, but I work with 5 offices across Northern Virginia. We have one in Alexandria, Fairfax, Leesburg, Manassas, and Culpeper are the offices that I work most closely with.
Great. Thank you, Tracy. And so sort of along those lines, but more towards Paul, because clearly with DARS, there needs to be that IEP or 504, or kind of talking about the circumstances around that. But does ENDependence require, it didn't sound like when you described it, but can you just clarify if they require an IEP or 504?
No. So for most of our services, no. The only requirement is that you identify as a person with a disability. Now, to participate in our pre-employment transition service programs and to get that referral from DARS, by extension, you would need to meet that requirement.
Great, thank you. Another question for all of you, perhaps, but does a 21-year-old need guardianship before applying for SSI?
As far as I know, I mean, I'll take that. And as far as I know, the answer to that is no. I know that guardianship is a very personal choice. And so I want to be careful about how I answer this. But guardianship does have implications for other, decision opportunities in a person's life. And so, as a person whose agency focuses on employment and employment decision making, it's guardianship can be a very sticky conversation. But the simple answer to guardianship and applying for Social Security, the answer is no.
Great, thank you, Tracy. And another one, if you have a high school diploma already and want to work with DARS, can you still get pre-employment supports?
So if a person has graduated with a standard diploma from high school and they are no longer enrolled in any type of post-secondary educational opportunity, the answer to that is no, you can't receive pre-employment transition services. However, there's still a host of other vocational rehabilitation services that we can provide if someone's interested in going to work. If a person were to graduate with a high school diploma and enroll in a community college program where they are still a person with a disability, so rules of 504 access would still apply, then they can continue to receive pre-employment transition services or begin to receive pre-employment transition services if they've not received them before. Paul, would you add anything else to that?
No, just that I agree. We've worked with a lot of students at Nova
Yeah.
in our pre-eds programs. So
Great, helpful information. I don't have any other questions except for my own question, which I'm going to pose right now. And now I only have a 12 and 9-year-old, so we're far away, but I need to start thinking about these things now. And Paul, you mentioned that there are many, you're underneath a larger umbrella of independence programs that are across the state, across the US, about 400. So is there one that deals more with the rural counties outside of Northern Virginia? Because we are starting to consult a lot with more of those families. I myself live just outside that Northern Virginia area. So is there an office out in those
yeah.
rural areas?
Yep.
Yes.
There
Okay.
are 17 offices across Virginia. I want to say
Okay.
the majority, there's a small part of Virginia that doesn't have a catchment area, but you can still, even if you're not in that, if you're in that small area, there's an office that will serve you. So no matter where you're at in Virginia, there's a still for you.
Awesome. Thank you. We've got another question that just came in for Paul. Loved your point about young adults who are reluctant to take more responsibility. Is there an on-ramp program for those adults?
What do we mean by an on-ramp program for those adults looking to take on more responsibility?
I think it's more those who are reluctant to take on more responsibility. Is
So
there
I
something
think,
specifically geared towards them?
yeah, well, one, I think when you're working with a peer counselor, it's a different vibe, if you will, than working with the parent on taking some of those responsibilities. So in my experience, young people are more willing to at least try to take on some of that responsibility when working with me or working with, one of our peer counselors or independent living staff on site. I think when it's coming from a parent, that's where a lot of that reluctance comes in. And just, being a model, I think the peer counseling model that we use, by essence, we are a model of it's possible. And this is what, adulthood looks like. And this can be for you as well. So I think a lot of the times, especially with young people, maybe there's this lack of control over their destination, where they're at. And so that's maybe where some of that frustration comes in.
So I might add to that just a
Mhm.
little bit, Paul. I think your answer is spot on. And just to, think about that whole modeling that you're talking about as we progress from maybe the high school and the very maybe intensive services in some situations where students, they may not have found their voice, right? They have one, but it may not be the loudest voice in the room, and we're working to get them to that place, right? So whatever we can do to support a young person developing that voice and that understanding that it's okay to represent myself and my ideas. And there's so many wonderful programs out there to build skills in self-advocacy. And so engaging your young person, whether it's your child or someone that you're working with, engaging them in those programs that just help them practice and provide opportunity to learn about themselves and then begin to represent that to someone else is a very good thing. When it comes to adult services, the service is going to be focused on the recipient. And we will welcome participation, say in the DARS realm, of anyone who wants to participate, but ultimately, it's going to be the voice of our clients that we will put in the forefront. And so supported decision making and all of that plays into it. But providing those opportunities as young people grow and develop and begin those first steps into adulthood to make sure that their practice and they have that chance to find their voice is very, very important.
Thank you so much. Stacia, any final question? Because we are a minute after 8.
We are at time. I do want to say I did put in the link for the evaluation form. So if you've got to run, please click on that and be sure to provide some feedback on this session. That feedback is super helpful to us as we plan future webinars. And so please be sure to fill that out. There's just one clarifying, Paul, are you the Prince William contact for ENDependence, or is that a different?
No, Prince William would have their own office, which
Okay.
I can provide.
Okay, awesome. So yes, you can reach out to Paul though, and he will give you that contact or find that online. And there was one other quick question. Are peer counselors available for all who self-identify as having a disability?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we have a limited number of peer counselors on staff. But yes, anybody that identifies as having a disability can get matched with a peer counselor here at the Independence Center.
And a shameless plug for their RAMP program.
Yeah.
If you are a person with a disability and you are interested in becoming a peer mentor, I know Paul would be happy to speak with you.
I'm always looking for peer mentors, so thank you. For both our RAMP program and our I Am Self-Advocacy program. The peer mentor is an essential piece to both. So
yeah, that lived experience that really allows that vibe you were talking about, Paul, which is, a great point to make. But that lived experience is really a tie that binds. And so, and if anyone's interested in becoming a peer mentor, you can contact either of us. I'm going to send you to Paul, though.
Thank you so much. We were using acronyms and we try not to do too much of that, but we did talk about SSI and SSDI. So I did include, for those of you who that may be a new set of acronyms, there's links to the federal, and as Paul mentioned, the ARC of Northern Virginia does a great job of providing resources and does great work, as does PETSI, the Parent Education Advocacy Training Center, on SSI and SSDI, and how those are not the same thing, and have very, very unique characteristics. Kimberly, Paul, Tracy, thank you so much. I'm going to just ask if any of you have any pressing last minute share that you didn't have a chance to contribute, because I know these folks probably have things to move on to. Tracy, Kimberly, or Paul?
Thank you for having me.
Sure.
yeah, ditto. Thanks for having us. It's been nice.
Thank you. Go ahead, Kimberly. Did you?
No,
I see you.
I just said thanks for having me.
Well, we are so glad you joined us. And again, thanks to those in the audience for making this a priority. I know those are steep hills to climb as you face adulthood. We here at Form Families Forward are available to consult with foster, adoptive, and kinship families. And we, as mentioned, have peer support groups for our youth and young adults, as well as a variety of services for families overall. So feel free to reach out to us, and we do appreciate you taking just a moment to complete that evaluation form, because it is really helpful for us to know what was meaningful, what you would like to see. And perhaps some of you will be in the session tomorrow night with Connor Strong and George Mason University. So good night, and thanks again.
Thank you.